Welcome to 3 Points, where we give you 3 points on this week's lesson.
My name's Priscilla.
And I'm Claudia.
Welcome to the first video on this channel. So grab your Bibles as we go in depth into the book of Galatians.
Now let's head on over to the 3 points that we'll be going over today. Point 1, people can change.
Point 2, everybody's welcome.
Point 3, expect internal disagreement.
Our first point is simple. People can change.
In a small village in Poland, a horse thief broke into a barn one night, planning to steal as many horses as he could. He got the first one and went back into the forest. He tied the horse to a tree and returned to the barn to steal another one. While doing that, he tripped over a barrel.
All the commotion woke up the farmer and caused him to get out of bed and to see what was going on. The thief, not knowing where to run, went into an empty stall and nervously got down on his hands and knees.
The farmer entered the stall and saw the thief on his hands and knees. "Who are you?" asked the farmer. The thief thought quickly and replied, "I am your horse." "Yes, that's it, I am your horse. Many years ago I was a human being, but I did something terrible and was transformed into a horse as a form of punishment in order to pay off my moral debt. I suppose that I have finally paid off my debt since I'm a human being again. My name is Yanko, and I can't wait to start my new life again." The farmer was impressed by the story and was notably amazed.
He invited the man into his house and gave him something to eat. Realizing that the poor man would need money, the farmer gathered some cash in order to help the man restart his life and sent him on his way. The next day, however, the farmer realized that he would need to replace his horse. So he went into the horse market.
While looking in the stables, he saw a suspiciously familiar horse. He got closer and examined its eyes, teeth, and a scar under its left ear identical to that of his previous horse. The farmer stepped back and exclaimed, "Yanko, it has only been a few hours. Did you do it again?"
For many people, believing that someone can change is as sophomoric as the story. However, the DNA of the gospel we follow is based on the truth that people can actually change. If there is a community of people that should believe in the fundamental truth that people can change, it should be this one. Those of us who call ourselves followers of Jesus Christ.
The main story for this first point is that the life of Saul of Tarsus, later called the Apostle Paul, a truly amazing story.
Acts 9:21 says, "They were caught off guard by Paul's preaching and not at all sure if they could trust him. They kept saying, 'Isn't this the man who wreaked havoc in Jerusalem among the believers? And didn't he come here to do the same thing, arrest us and drag us off to jail in Jerusalem for sentencing by the high priests?'"
Let me paint the picture for you. Years after the resurrection of Jesus, there is a man that not only rejects the message of Christ, but is literally killing Christians and searching everywhere to destroy them. This man is not only indifferent about the gospel, he is actively against it. This man wants to destroy any follower of Jesus. Naturally, we're talking about Saul of Tarsus.
The mere mention of the name Saul of Tarsus caused first century Christians to run for their lives in fear. Christians were terrified of what could happen to them if he discovered their identities or their whereabouts. Saul of Tarsus was an enemy of the gospel until one day, en route to Damascus, he saw the light. No, seriously, he saw a light. Literally, a light more powerful than any light he had ever seen before, to the point that he was left blind.
But it was more than just the light which he encountered. He had an encounter with Jesus Christ, the resurrected Jesus. He heard a voice that spoke with him and instructed him on what to do. Now blind, he went back into the city where he awaited further instructions from God. His new mission now was to preach the message he previously attempted to destroy. He became a follower of Jesus, from killing followers of Jesus to becoming one of their most influential leaders.
If there is something that you don't like in your life, you can change it. If you don't like your weight, you can change it. If you don't appreciate the reputation that you have, you can change. People addicted to alcohol or gambling can change. People can change. Can people around you really change? Can you actually change? Yes. Taking the conversion of Saul the Pharisee into Paul, one of the foremost founders of the Christian faith, into account, all of these things and more are in fact possible.
Acts 22 describes a confession that Paul of Tarsus openly declared. "And when your witness Stephen was murdered, I was right there, holding the coats of the murderers and cheering them on. And now they see me totally converted. What better qualification could I have?"
Can you imagine the encounter between Stephen and Paul in heaven? You probably remember Stephen. He received a brutal stoning, pretty much orchestrated by Saul of Tarsus, that resulted in his death and martyrdom. Imagine Stephen, after being resurrected, opening his eyes and rejoicing on entering the pearly gates of heaven, and suddenly he sees Saul of Tarsus. I can hear the question, what? What are you doing here? That's going to be a remarkable encounter. People can change. Just look at the transformation from Saul of Tarsus, a killer of Christians, to Paul of Tarsus, preacher of the Christian faith. People can change.
Now for our second point, everybody is welcome.
Paul's mission was to preach to the Gentiles. The mission of the church, given by Jesus to the disciples before his ascension, was to preach to the Gentiles. If you Google the word Gentiles, your search would result in this definition: a person who is not Jewish. Now, the gospel of Jesus Christ was to be proclaimed to all the world. Jesus Christ did not only die for the salvation of the Jewish nation, but for the salvation of everybody.
Acts 15:3-4 says, "After they were sent off and on their way, they told everyone they met as they traveled through Phoenicia and Samaria about the breakthrough to the non-Jewish outsiders. Everyone who heard the news cheered. It was terrific news. When they got to Jerusalem, Paul and Barnabas were graciously received by the whole church, including the apostles and leaders. They reported on their recent journey and how God had used them to open things up to the outsiders."
Everybody is welcome, even the Mexicans, even the illegal immigrants, even those who are transgender, even people in jail, government officials, the homeless, Native Americans, people in Papua New Guinea, and even people in downtown Buenos Aires or near the markets in Calcutta, India. People from all the different walks of life with a sense of fashion or no fashion sense at all. Every nation, whether a first world country or a third world country, every town, with or without Wi-Fi, were forgiven and cleansed from their sins at the cross. Everybody includes pretty much everybody. The message is for everyone.
The problem with this idea is that we humans naturally try to isolate ourselves into different classes of people. We somehow believe we are better than and or superior to others. In our quest for feeling special, we put people down for many reasons: the way they look, the way they talk, and the way they eat, or even the way they do life. This particular course of action was equally implemented among people in the first century.
The message of the gospel, the message of grace and forgiveness of sin, is for everybody, and it is up to the grace of God to transform a person into what he desires them to become. What would have happened to Paul if the message of salvation was not extended to murderers? What would have happened to you or to me? This is the grace and undeserving favor of God.
And now for our third and final point, expect internal disagreement. It is true that there were many that rejoiced in receiving the news that the Gentiles were accepting the gospel of Jesus. But many others also disagreed about accepting Gentiles into the church. Yep, even inside of our own church, even among the apostles, there were disagreements. Followers of Jesus are not exempt from disagreement. Disagreements are a constant struggle in our human nature. Expect internal disagreement.
Acts 15:5 states, "Some Pharisees stood up to say their piece. They had become believers, but continued to hold to the hard party line of the Pharisees. You have to circumcise the pagan converts, they said. You must make them keep the law of Moses." In your family, disagreements can develop between you or your parents, you or your siblings, or even amongst your parents. The reality is that not everybody is going to agree with you all the time. Opposition is to be expected. If you want to be the best student in your class, unfortunately, some of your friends might look at you condescendingly and may call you nerdy or antisocial.
This is also true in your spiritual life. If you want to be closer to God, somebody might insinuate that you think you're better than others. Opposition is part of life. It is a part of human nature. It is even present inside of the church. Think about it. If you were the enemy, let's say Satan, where would you invest more time in order to destroy people? People in darkness are already lost. Wouldn't you try to cause division in the church? Expect internal disagreements.
If you have found a perfect church, please reconsider joining it. Otherwise, it would no longer be perfect if you did. No church is perfect. We aren't perfect. We are all in the process of being changed into Christ's image. Expect internal disagreements. A church is not a museum of saints, but rather a hospital for hurting people looking for healing through Christ.
Some Pharisees were preaching that accepting Jesus Christ was not enough, that a requirement of circumcision was necessary for salvation. Of course, this idea was not accepted by Paul, who preached that salvation was received through grace and faith alone. In other words, Jesus plus nothing equals salvation.
Jesus made us right with God through his sacrifice on the cross. Nothing else is necessary to be saved. His grace will transform us into the people God can use to implement the plan which He has for us. Remember, people can change, and God is calling us to allow His grace to transform our lives. But our works will never be a requirement for salvation.
So, let's go over the 3 points we went over again today. Point 1,
People can change.
point 2,
Everybody's welcome.
and point 3.
Expect internal disagreements. Thank you so much for joining us on this first video.
And if you enjoyed it, make sure you give us a big thumbs up. And if you want to keep watching us, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below,
And if you're wondering where we got our material from, we've taken it from the Sabbath School lesson.
which will be linked down below also if you want to check it out. All right, thank you so much for joining us again. See you next
Bye.
week.